And good evening. We are doing it live here in the 5 o'clock hour in Los Angeles. Yabba Dabba Do time. Mottek On Money 5 nights a week for you. Live on the air here in 790 KABC. Streaming live online worldwide at KABC.com and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at KABC.com, Apple, iTunes, all your favorite podcast platforms, and on the socials too. X, for example, formerly known as Twitter and Instagram. Stocks staging a modest rebound today as those benchmark government bond yields slipped a bit after kissing new recent highs. We did also see a pullback in oil prices, and it looks like tech stocks had a bit of a rebound today. The Dow coming in for a closing gain of 116 points. The S&P 500 of 25. The NASDAQ composite gained 108 points. The upward march in bond yields continues, impacting fixed-rate mortgage rates. In fact, the yield in the 10-year note hit a new 16-year high today, just above 4.65% earlier in the day, but ended slightly lower. We'll be talking about mortgage rates this evening with Fred Solomon, president of Solomon Financial Mortgage and Realty. Mortgage rates have shot to the highest seen in 23 years. We saw oil futures hit $95 a barrel today, the most expensive in 13 months. Price has been pulling back a bit today, though, helped to alleviate some of the market's concerns about higher inflation. Oil settled just below $92 a barrel, but have you noticed at Southern California gas pumps, another big spike? Regular gas in Los Angeles now averaging $6.28 a gallon. That's a jump of about 12 cents overnight. Premium now up to $6.59 a gallon, and diesel averaging $6.49 a gallon in the L.A. Long Beach area, according to today's AAA fuel gauge survey. A new law here in California raising the minimum wage for fast food workers to $20 an hour next year. When it takes effect on April 1st, fast food workers here in California will have the highest guaranteed base salary in the fast food business. The state's minimum wage for all other workers, $15.50 per hour, is already among the highest in the United States. It's been a rough month for Apple, down 9.3% so far this month as far as the stock is concerned, putting it on pace for the worst month of the year since December of last year when it fell 12%. We'll take a closer look at Apple here this evening. A shocking cybersecurity breach being reported involving Chinese hackers nabbing about 60,000 emails at the U.S. State Department. China, meanwhile, has emerged as a big topic in the second Republican presidential primary debate at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley last night. China's real estate sector, meanwhile, also on the ropes. I'll discuss the latest China news tonight with China expert Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, inflation, and the whole works. Joining us live now is money manager Gabriel Wisdom, managing director at American Money Management and author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel Wisdom, thank you very much for taking the call. You're based right here in Southern California, so you see those high gas prices along with all of us here. Oil's been on a tear. Inflation's still running hot. The stock market bouncing around. Give us your view of things here at the moment.
Well, Frank, the oil companies are spending far less on development. At the same time, demand remains very high. And for publicly traded energy companies, you're seeing it. They're spending very little. Cash flow is very high. And the demand for global fossil fuel it's very strong. Now, the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve is already at its lowest level in decades. What's the Biden administration going to do? What's the intention there? To refill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? Well, there's been no intent expressed whatsoever, but the higher oil prices often feed into inflation within a few months. And, if you combine the rising energy prices with very sticky wage inflation, you can see why the futures markets are not pricing in a decline in interest rates anytime soon.
Where do you see oil go from here? $100, $150, as we heard some analysts predict recently. Where do you see oil prices go from here?
Well, Frank, we've been there before. It was, about 10, 12 years ago, we were well above $100 a barrel. So it could quite easily happen. The other thing going for us is that electric vehicle sales, at least in the United States, are almost 9% of total vehicle sales, and that continues to increase. But the problem for electric vehicle manufacturers is that they keep losing money. The only profitable EV producer remains Tesla. Everybody else is losing money. So I would say that energy prices are likely to go higher and stay there for a while.
All right, and speaking of car companies, got that big UAW strike. The United Auto Workers Union had President Biden walk the picket lines with the strikers yesterday for the first time ever. A president walking a picket line and with these companies that were bailed out by the government during the last financial crisis. What about this UAW strike and the outlook for the automakers?
Well, it's very disturbing. I would think that the UAW members would be very well aware that the big three aren't as big as they used to be. And in fact, there's a chance they could go bankrupt again. These have been the best of times since the 2007, 2008 Great Recession, and 2 out of 3 of them went bankrupt. Ford barely scraped by, and they're still having problems. They're going to lose $50 billion this year on the electric vehicle division at Ford. So they're walking a very sensitive tightrope. And by the way, after World War II, we had 4 million workers going on strike annually. Now it's a less than 1/4 of that as a total percentage of the labor force. So these strikes, while they seem to be headline news, they're not like they used to be.
Right. It was shocking news earlier this year when it was announced General Motors had only sold 2 Hummer EVs in the first quarter. Count them, 1, 2. And it looks like a more recent report said that the GMC Hummer EV pickup sales were down 83%, according to the latest reading. So the big three certainly having a tough time selling these EVs.
No question about it. And Ford Motors' decision to stop moving forward with a planned $3.5 billion battery plant in Michigan is a very big example of the challenge that U.S. automakers are facing from the non-unionized car companies, including Tesla.
On the air live with Gabriel Wisdom with American Money Management, and we're watching those bond yields spike again today before pulling back a bit, impacting fixed-rate mortgage rates, which are now running at a 23-year high. Gabriel, it's impacting real estate in a big way now. What's your assessment of where bond yields go from here and where those bond funds go from here?
Well, Frank, what the Fed chairman has been saying is that the economy hasn't yet really felt full effects of the higher borrowing costs. And the Federal Reserve is finally looking past that preferred inflation gauge, which is known as the personal consumption expenditures, or the PCE gauge. Now, to put this in perspective, personal consumption represents the money that people have to spend after they pay their taxes. It runs about $15 trillion annually based on July's numbers. And that's been flattening. So the Federal Reserve is cognizant of this, but they're concerned about the tight labor markets and also the resilient consumer. So they're also saying that it won't be until 2026, 2.5 years from now, when inflation is at their preferred rate of 2%. So we have a ways to go.
Isn't that something? And we heard from Dr. Doom economist Nouriel Roubini, who said that the Fed's effort to get inflation down to 2% is basically a mission impossible at this point. So thanks for laying it out, that timetable there. On that PCE index, the Fed's preferred gauge of consumer prices, we're going to be getting a new reading on that tomorrow. So that'll be something that'll be making news. We also see that unemployment lines got a bit longer this past week to 204,000. And the other report on the economy today showed that the economy grew at a rate of 2.1% in the second quarter, according to revised numbers coming out today. What about on the question of a soft landing, hard landing, bumpy landing, or no landing? Where do you land on that one?
I'd say all bets are off for the moment because most of the government economic data that we rely upon, they're basically our tools, the way we can see where we're going, those are completely going to cease during any kind of a government shutdown. And those potential effects of a government shutdown will expand all the way to the Federal Reserve's next interest rate decision in November. You mentioned the personal consumption expenditures price index. We won't have that For Social Security recipients, there won't be a cost of living adjustment upwards, which normally happens in October. Some of it occurs in September with the CPI report, but we won't have that either. Now, there's a contingency plan, and the Fed's already preparing to deal with this, but awaiting further data, well, we're going to hear more of that kind of language from Jerome Powell and the FOMC, I think.
Right. Our news, of course, has been covering it. The U.S. government notifying federal workers today that a shutdown appears imminent at this point. So that's something we'll be watching very closely, of course, and the economic impact of all of that. As far as China is concerned, I'll be talking to Gordon Chang about this tonight, but a lot of big concerns about defaults in the real estate sector in China and some more canaries in the coal mine there. Gabriel, what are your thoughts on China here?
Well, I'm concerned about China as well. Now, you have Mr. Chang, who's a renowned expert in this area, and I'll be interested to hear his thoughts. But I have observed cracks in the commercial real estate markets here in the United States, and we know that's a severe problem in China. There's a new one that is going to be a very big headache, and I think it'll reverberate here all the way to the United States. But there's a rolling recession in the commercial real estate space, and what we hear about mostly is the old office buildings in urban areas that were so hard hit by the pandemic when workers were working from home and didn't come back, and now they're empty, and so rents are going down. But the latest data shows that the commercial real estate loans that are going to be coming due and have to be refinanced at much higher rates will pose a very big problem for U.S. banks, especially the smaller ones. And, banks just can't seem to catch a break.
On there live with Gabriel Wisdom, and certainly big news here in California with the new law raising the minimum wage for fast food workers to $20 an hour next year, starting April 1st. The governor signing that bill into law today. And what about the fast food chains here? A lot of companies already doing things to minimize their labor expenses by putting in robots or touch screens in restaurants and having robotic couriers and all that on the sidewalks. What do you see?
You loved Lala Kent on Vanderpump Rules. Now get to know her on Give Them Lala.
I feel like I have friends in this camera.
I know. I love that you're looking at the camera. No, you do have friends.
No, I know.
Anyone
I feel
watching
like they're
you.
all here.
Yes.
We're all just like hanging out. Ocean's very into thumbs up right now. She's like this in her face. Thumbs up. We do it all the time. She loves that face.
I love that. Give one to your friends.
Watch what Lala is talking about on YouTube or search for Give Them Lala wherever you listen.
Head on that front.
That's very interesting because automation, robots, these are one solution that every company is looking at. Now, $20 an hour, that's barely a livable wage for most people in metropolitan areas. So something had to be done. But at the same time, what about the profitability of these companies? And many folks aren't going back to work in the fast food area because they're living at or near the poverty level, and it's just not right. But there's a new report from Goldman Sachs about artificial intelligence and robots, and they're predicting now that AI could boost U.S. earnings for the 1,000 companies that trade publicly in the Russell 1000 by an average of 8%. And by an average of 19%, and that 8% of those companies could see an average rise in earnings of 60% or more within the next couple of years, all due to automation, robots, and artificial intelligence. This is very exciting. That also means we'll need some new job creation, and there will be some new jobs as a result of this. Unfortunately, you just don't know.
All right. The Magnificent Seven, of course, led the market rally this year. Apple now down 9.3% so far this month. It's been a rough month overall, but Apple especially getting hit hard here. What's going on with Apple here, and what's your view on Apple?
Well, they're having problems with their supply chain coming out of China. That's one thing. The other thing is the new phone sales are sort of unexciting. And then finally, It's September. September is the worst month of the year. Now, we hear about October being the dreaded month because it conjures up memories of the great crash of 1987, or the crash of 1929, or the big panic of 1907 if you're a historian. But people generally dread October. It's when we have Halloween. We all dress up and go scare people. So it's it's one of those psychologically abhorrent months in the financial markets. But the worst month is actually September, and I think it's hit Apple.
And, of course, let's not forget October 2008, which was quite eventful as well in more recent times. And we, of course, were on the air back then, Gabriel Wisdom. And at this point, where are you putting money now and or taking it off the table?
Well, Frank, that I still like the rare minerals space and energy, and I like the basic metals like gold, silver, palladium. Mexico, this came out today, Mexico is saying that lithium concessions that they made with China are under review. They initially handed over the lithium business to China, but they're all about exploring gold and silver and copper opportunities. It's very difficult to extract lithium reserves. They're trapped in clay deposits, making the extraction very difficult. But for gold, silver, and the other metals, which most of the metals, you need them in EV, you need them in everything, and they're cheap. Costco, by the way, is selling 1-ounce gold bars, and they're selling out. So this is a very out-of-favor area, and I like it for the long run.
Gabriel Wisdom, thank you very much for that thorough assessment here tonight. That is money manager Gabriel Wisdom, managing director at American Money Management, based here in Southern California, and author of Wisdom on Value Investing. It's always great to have you with us here, Gabriel. Thank you very much for taking the call here tonight.
Thank you, Frank.
Friends, if you're hurt in an accident, you need an experienced advocate, and Clark Fielding and his team of sharks at Fielding Law are on standby, ready to dive into your case. My friend Clark the Shark is fearless for justice and your go-to attorney when injured in an accident that wasn't your fault. Whether it's a car accident, slip, trip, fall, or any kind of personal injury, Fielding Law is here to make sure you get the care, attention, and compensation you deserve. Fielding Law can assess the circumstances of the case, negotiate tenaciously with insurance companies, and if needed, file a lawsuit and litigate to seek fair compensation on behalf of you, the injured party. An injury is a major disruption in your life. Medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, property damage, and other losses incurred as a result of the injury are part of the damages. Don't try and handle the process alone. You need an expert in the process. The team at Fielding Law, the ones to trust. Put Clark Fielding's number in your phone under the word accident. That number is 833-88-SHARK, 833-88-SHARK, or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Good evening. Winning day for the stock market. A bit of a rebound today with the Dow closing higher by 116 points at 33,666. S&P 500 of 25 at 4,300, and the NASDAQ gained 108 points at 13,201. The yield on the 10-year note eased a bit today, settling at 4.58%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, which hit a 23-year high this week. According to the latest survey from mortgage giant Freddie Mac, we'll take a closer look at what's happening with mortgage rates and the real estate business coming up in the next half hour. The cryptos, we see Bitcoin down about $50, back to $27,036. Ethereum down 4 at $1,653, and Doge at 6 cents. The price of oil settling up 11 cents to 91.82. Actually, this is after hours now. We did see oil pull back today from a recent high of the year. And at the gas pump, we're seeing a big difference here. It looks like a 12-cent jump overnight here in the Los Angeles area once again. We've been seeing eye-popping jumps lately like this. Self-serve regular gas in L.A. now averaging $6.28 a gallon. Premium now averages $6.59 a gallon. And that's a 10-cent jump overnight. Diesel now at $6.49 a gallon, also a couple of cents higher overnight. By the way, the record price for gas here in Los Angeles happened back on October 5th last year. The regular price was $6.49 a gallon. Now premium is already at $6.59 a gallon, regular at $6.28. We could be challenging the record highs here for the Los Angeles area, given the current situation. Taking a look at the dollar, which has been making news lately, it's been firming against other currencies. Right now we're at 105 versus the euro, 149 versus the Japanese yen, 122 against the British pound sterling. Apple shares been bouncing around lately, up 26 cents today at 170.69. Apple's down more than 9% so far this month, putting it on pace for its worst month of the year since December of last year when it fell 12%. It's also on pace for its worst quarter since the second quarter of last year. NVIDIA shares moving higher today by more than $6, back to $430.89. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KBC, and at 6, stay tuned for the 790 KBC News Blitz, hosted by our legal eagle, Royal Oak, 790 KBC legal analyst, hosting the 790 KBC News Blitz starting at 6 o'clock. Let's take a look at what's happening with real estate with the new readings, and, of course, the big reading today on mortgage rates showing they've shot to the highest seen in 23 years, according to the new survey out today from mortgage giant Freddie Mac. We've seen home sales tank recently here in Southern California in the face of those higher mortgage rates. Prices, though, have been holding up pretty well. In fact, the latest S&P Case-Shiller CoreLogic Home Price Index shows from June to July, prices moved up 0.6% in the Los Angeles area and up 0.4% over the past year. In San Diego, prices up 0.7% month over month and up 0.7% for the year. In San Francisco, up 0.1% month to month, but down 6.2% over the past year. Let's get an update on what's happening now in the mortgage business and real estate tonight with Fred Solomon, the president of Solomon Financial Mortgage and Realty. Fred Solomon, thank you very much for coming to the line. Give us your reaction to these mortgage rates at a 23-year high today, first of all.
Well, I can tell you this. It was busy, and now it's not busy. But, as you mentioned before you had me on the air, you said it best. And, here's what's happening is that people want to sell right now. They really do. But with interest rates being 5% higher than they were at the end of 2021, when you look at $1 million mortgage, which is normal right here in L.A., $1 million mortgage on 5% higher rates, we're talking $50,000 a year in interest. If you take $50,000 and you divide it by 12, we're talking like over $4,000 a month higher mortgage payment. The average person can't swallow that. But the people that I'm doing business with, my last few purchases have been with movie actors. They don't care where the rates are because they make a lot of money. People who bought their dream home, they don't care where the mortgage rates are because they bought their dream home. So it really has affected the mortgage industry 100%. But for the people that have money, they know it's still a good time to buy. And if you own the home for at least 7 years, historically speaking, it's going to be worth more than what you paid for it, even if it drops in value after you purchase it. And that's the philosophy that these people live with.
On there live with Fred Solomon, president of Solomon Financial Mortgage and Realty. What is your outlook for home prices here in the Los Angeles area?
Great question, and I'll tell you exactly what I do to watch that. The first thing that I do is I look at what's going on in the inventory because here, in many areas, I live in the Palm Springs area, but my office is in Newport Beach. But here in the Palm Springs area, our inventory is down 40% versus where we were pre-COVID. So when we have inventory down 40%, but it has doubled in the last 12 months. So it was down much more than 40%, but we're still 40% lower than we were March of 2020. So what's happening is people still want to buy homes and they have the money to do it and they're borrowing and, they might be selling properties in LA and then coming out to the Palm Springs area and paying cash for them. So my outlook is you've got to watch what's happening to the sales volume. You got to watch what's happening in the jobs market. Are people gaining jobs? Job growth is slowing down. You got to watch what's happening there. And when people start losing jobs, and then we have higher interest rates, and then more people moving out of California than moving in right now, those are the stats, then we're going to have a problem, and we could easily see home prices drop. But as long as inventory stays low and people don't want to sell their home and get a 5% higher mortgage, then we're going to see home prices continue to go up because it's a supply and demand issue.
One other thing impacting the high end, which it sounds like you're an expert on here, is ULA, this tax on the so-called mansion tax as it was sold to the voters here and passed, but it's impacted transactions above $5 million, as well as commercial real estate transactions. Has put a big chill on this activity here. What's your impression of the impact of all that?
Well, I can tell you this. My dad had a property on State Street in Santa Barbara, a little retail shopping center, and property values in commercial have come down about 50% where they were 12 to 18 months ago. So believe it or not, but this is crazy, residential real estate has been much stronger than commercial real estate. And the reason is because it's very difficult to get commercial financing today. You know, if you get an SBA loan and you are the single tenant user on a commercial building and you can put 10% down and buy a building, no problem. But besides SBA financing, it's tough to get commercial financing right now. And because of that, it's hurting the market. And then all these loans are adjusting. These loans are, they have these, they're graduated fixed rate mortgages on these commercial loans, and they all have prepayment penalties. So once these loans start adjusting, and now it affects the cash flow on these properties, it's a tough market right now. Commercial market is getting hit hard. That
Certainly,
I can tell you.
Certainly is, and thank you for that excellent assessment. Now, getting back to mortgage rates at a 23-year high this week, according to the latest survey from mortgage giant Freddie Mac. The average 30-year fix now is 7.31%, the highest seen since December of the year 2000. Where do you see the rates go from here?
Oh, man, sadly, one of my close friends predicted that we were going to see rates at 8% this year, and I thought he was doing some recreational activities that caused him to think that way. But crazily enough, this guy was spot on. Unfortunately, he passed away, and sadly, a smart guy. But what I see is I have to pay attention.
Introducing Rich Valdez, America at Night, the podcast.
Welcome to the conversation, familia.
A perfect blend of news and entertainment, interviews and insights.
Eye-opening, nothing very surprising, but definitely eye-opening.
America's nighttime town hall whenever you want.
What else could it possibly mean?
Rich Valdez, America at Night.
Let's get to the meat and potatoes of it.
Follow the podcast wherever you listen.
To the inflation numbers, because here's what's happened. This is so crazy. I can't understand it. So we had 8.6 inflation last year, right? 8.6% inflation, and the interest rates were in the mid sixes. Now what's happened to inflation? We're at 3.4% inflation, and what's happened to the interest rates? They've gone up 1.25%. How can you explain that when you have lower inflation numbers and interest rates are supposed to drop? And what has happened to our inverted yield curves, right? Short-term interest rates are getting higher rates of return than long-term interest rates. We've had a 14-month inverted yield curve. 14 months. That's the first sign of a recession.
Right.
The definition of a recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP. I don't see it happening right now because we're still seeing positive inflation numbers with the GDP and CPI index and all that stuff. It's a head scratcher. Don't try to explain it to someone. I just watch the inflation numbers, and that would be the first sign of lower interest rates. Lower inflation, lower rates.
All right, it looks like we're way off from that. We're way off the Fed's target of 2%, and tomorrow a new inflation number is coming out, so we'll be watching that very, very carefully. So I know you've been doing this for a long time. Does this remind you of anything we've seen during the financial crisis or back in the 80s, or any historical comparisons to what we're seeing here now?
Well, that's a great question as well, because back in the Jimmy Carter days, we had what was called stagflation, right? And so high rates, and inflation was going through the roof, but the economy was slow as could be. And that's the only thing that I can put, if I was to put a bullseye on it, that would be something very similar to what happened during the Jimmy Carter era. But I do zero cost mortgages personally. So if the rates come down, you can always refinance to the lower rate and pay nothing to do it. So I kind of have a program that builds into that, what happens if rates do come down, because people want to always know, hey, Fred, what's going to happen with rates? What's going to happen with rates? I get that question 1,000 times a day. But my answer is, You got to watch the inflation numbers, you got to watch GDP, and you got to watch the jobs report. Those are the three things that are going to tell you what's going to happen with with the interest rates. My personal opinion is that they have to come down, especially if we go into a recession. It's inevitable.
All right. What about adjustable rate mortgages? Are they back in fashion?
I wouldn't get one. Not me. I mean, adjustable rate, what's that prime now? 8.5%, right? So why would you get an adjustable rate that's higher than what you can get on a fixed rate? Doesn't make sense.
All right. Well, that's an important point. And with the expectation here, hopefully the rates will come down. If you got an adjustable back in the 80s, you did pretty well with that big drop, that rally in the bond market, which, of course, now has evaporated. So thank you very much for fielding all of those questions here tonight and for your thorough assessment of what's happening with the mortgage business and real estate. Fred Solomon, the president of Solomon Financial Mortgage and Realty. Great to connect with you here, Fred. Thank you very much for taking the call here this evening.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And right after Frank Mottek here. The future of joint pain relief is here. It's called QC Kinetics, advanced regenerative medicine. Amazing stuff. Now, if you've been told more steroids or surgery are your only options, don't go so fast. Get a second opinion and learn more about how you can harness your body's own healing agents to attack that joint pain. I'm talking lasting relief. QC Kinetics doesn't mask the pain. These treatments go right to the very root of the problem, using concentrated healing properties placed directly into your joint to restore and repair that damaged joint tissue. Imagine living your life this fall with no more pain in your knees, hips, shoulders, or back. No drugs, no downtime, no surgery. Life's about motion, and QC Kinetics is giving people back their lives with these all-natural treatments. Call QC Kinetics for a free consultation, the nation's leader in regenerative medicine. QC Kinetics, locations in Glendale, the city of Orange, Mission Viejo, now also in Costa Mesa. The number is 213-997-PAIN. Call 213-997-PAIN. Again, that's 213-997-PAIN. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KABC. A shocking cybersecurity breach being reported today involving Chinese hackers nabbing about 60,000 emails at the U.S. State Department. Meanwhile, China's real estate sector continues on the ropes. China, meanwhile, emerging as a big topic in the second Republican presidential primary debate at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley last night. Let's bring in our China expert now, Gordon Chang, China expert and author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War, and on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon Chang, thank you very much for taking the call. First of all, looks like the Republican presidential candidates locked horns last night over TikTok and other issues related to China. Give us your impressions of the discussion about China at the debate last night.
Well, it would really be nice to know what they said, but they were talking over each other for almost all the time.
Right.
But you could get the impression that they really were going after Vivek Ramaswamy. It was Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, and Vice President Pence. So it was that free-for-all, and everyone decided that now was the time to get the newcomer.
Right, and Governor DeSantis calling for a decoupling of the U.S. economy from China, right? So that issue also came up.
Yes, and it's important that this be talked about because this is critical. The United States has vulnerabilities to a hostile power that is trying to use that power. So, for instance, they're no longer selling gallium and germanium, those two rare earths. And, you know, they can use this in other areas as well. So the United States, just as a matter of survival, is going to have to start making sure that we're not subject to boycotts from the Chinese.
All right, and what about on the issue of TikTok and concerns about how that Chinese-owned social media product is being used by the Chinese government?
Yes. Well, the Chinese government, first of all, steals data. And second of all, it uses the algorithm to push propaganda narratives. And we have seen this all the time. We know that this is the problem because when President Trump tried to force a sale of TikTok to Oracle, the deal cratered not over price, but it cratered over the control of the algorithm, which means that Beijing really is intending to use this to push its propaganda lines in the United States. And that's just completely unacceptable, of course.
Can you give us some examples? I know you follow this very, very closely, but what are they doing on TikTok?
First of all, last year there were China was propagating these Russian disinformation narratives about Ukraine. We know that TikTok has been used to glorify drug use. although TikTok has community guidelines on illegal drug use, you can go on the app and find videos with millions of hits about how to use illegal substances. So these are the things that China is propagating. And, of course, their propaganda narratives with regard to elections. So it just runs the gamut. If it's an issue which Beijing has an interest in, you can probably find its propaganda line on TikTok being pushed to Americans.
And P.S., TikTok's the number one social media platform, right?
150 million downloads in the United States. And remember, we have 330 or so million people. So basically, it's almost half the American population has TikTok on its phones, which means that China has a lot of data about half the Americans.
And let's not forget about the Chinese balloons, too, right? Any update on that?
Well, last week, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said that with a high degree of confidence, the U.S. intelligence community assessed that China did not access any data from that balloon because the sensors weren't turned on. Even if that is true, Frank, China got a lot of information because they saw how the United States reacted to that balloon. It's not just the president of the United States reacting to it. It's specific commands and specific general officers. So that was invaluable, and China could not have gotten that data any other way. I think that General Milley should have been very clear about that because he was sugarcoating the Chinese belligerence against the U.S.
Isn't that something? Now, while we have you on the line, we're on the line here with Gordon Chang, China expert. A shocking cybersecurity breach involving Chinese hackers accessing about 60,000 emails at the U.S. State Department. What's your reaction to that report?
What's shocking is that we have left ourselves open to Chinese after all of these years, after all of these massive data downloads. We still have vulnerable networks. This one was vulnerable because the State Department used one single vendor, Microsoft. Now, there are ways to get around that, to mitigate this, but you would have thought, Frank, that we would have done this 2 decades ago. So really, this is a question not so much of Chinese hacking us. It's a question of allowing ourselves to be hacked by the Chinese.
Chinese economy has been in focus lately with this meltdown of their real estate sector. We're getting some bulletins today. China's Evergrande chairman has been put under police surveillance in China. The BBC is reporting that. And China Evergrande suspends trading as new trouble roils the property market there. That according to the New York Times. Evergrande's restructuring plan at risk amid China property crisis. Those are some of the recent headlines. What's the latest on what's happening with that?
Well, Evergrande is not going to be able to present a restructuring plan. So basically it means that company is gone. I think most people should have assumed that to be the case. And the issue is going to be Country Garden, which last year was China's largest property developer by sales. And there's a lot of other companies that are going to be right behind Country Garden. The problem here is supply and demand. There are far too many apartments. There's not very much demand. Chinese people are in a deflationary psychology, and they say, why buy now when I can get later on a lot cheaper? So the big property developers just don't have the cash flow to service their obligations, not only the foreign obligations, but the domestic ones as well.
Gordon Chang, China expert, author of The Coming Collapse of China, the Great U.S.-China Tech War, and on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon Chang, thank you very much for joining us live here this evening.
Thank you, Frank.
Update for the stock market, recapping the action today. The Dow up 116 points, the S&P 500 of 25, the NASDAQ composite gained 108 points. The yield in the 10-year note easing a bit to 4.58%. That's the one that impacts the fixed-rate mortgage rates, which have hit a 23-year high this week. Stay tuned for the 790 KBC News Blitz. Our legal eagle, Royal Oaks, longtime 790 KBC legal expert, is the host of the 790 KBC News Blitz, coming up at 6. I'll be back again tomorrow evening at Yabba Dabba Doo time in the 5 o'clock hour. Mottek On Money right here on 790 KBC.
Hey guys, it's Susie Schuster, and I am so excited for my new podcast coming out this fall. It is called What the Football with Susie Schuster and the Princess of Darkness, Amy Trask. If you're looking for a new podcast to listen to about jargon, heavy-legged waist benders, this is not for you. We're going to have big girl conversations, and we are going super deep to bring you weekly guests that you won't find anywhere else. It is What the Football with Susie Schuster and Amy Trask, wherever you listen.